Hi everyone. Today I'd like to give you a bit of a quick start guide on how to play Magic, specifically Commander. My aim is to get you on the board and playing in 10 minutes or less, assuming you have a deck before you sit down and watch this. Magic is a wizard battle between several types of wizards called planeswalkers, and while that's not important to the mechanics, it's important to understand what we're doing. I'd like to talk about cards. Cards include many different types, but ultimately what they are is generally spells. Spells and lands. Lands are the resources for casting spells. And lands that say basic land or any other land type generally can tap to add a mana. Tapping only means turn sideways to activate. That's it. Let's talk about how to understand a Magic card. On the top left, you can see the name of the card. On the top right, you'll see the cost of the card. Slightly below that, the art, and directly below the art is a typing line. There are two types of types, which is ironic, a super type and a subtype. What's important to know is there's a generalized categorization. You'll see creature dash the type. Below that is a description of the card. If the card does nothing other than exist as a creature, it will have an explanation of its mechanics. For example, trample. You may see the reminder text in parentheses explaining what trample does, or not. If you don't, I would encourage you to go to Scryfall or the official Magic Gatherer website and read the ruling of that card there. Below that, you'll see the creature's power and toughness, if any, as well as any further effects. Cards can have multiple effects and abilities. They read them in order and resolve them in order because typically that's the order that they'll impact each other. If you look in the corner of the card, you can see that there is a numerical value attached to the card, sometimes in the form of color symbols as well as numbers. Generally, what this means is this is the number of lands that you have to tap, which is turning sideways, and activate in order to spend mana, which is generated by the land, and cast the spell. Instants and sorceries are the only card types that do not stay once you have cast them. And while there are some steps in between after we cast the spell, it's important to know that they will not hang around on the battlefield. Everything else will. Those cards are called permanents, cards that will stay permanently on the battlefield. The main phases of the game are untap, upkeep, draw. Main phase 1, combat, which includes declaring attacks, declaring blockers, resolving damage, and moving on. Main phase 2, and end step. Every turn has these steps, even if you choose to do nothing, and so players can respond in kind. We'll get to that in a moment. Untap all of your lands and all your permanents. Upkeep, several cards will say something happens in upkeep. Usually it's a pause between other phases for cards to have effects. Draw a card. Main phase, this is your time to play things like lands, sorceries, creatures. Anything that's not an instant or flash can only be played at this time or the second main phase. Combat, which includes all of the sub-steps, declaring attackers, blockers, resolving damage. Main phase 2 is after combat. It gives you another chance to play your lands and all the other spells that don't have instant or flash. And then we get to the end step where cards that say at the end of turn are wearing off, as well as resolving any effects before we move to the next turn. If you buy a pre-constructed deck, there's a very helpful card that will illustrate all of the steps and phases in the turn. I'll put it up on screen here. Even if you don't, it's very handy to have these at the table as you're learning. The board is divided up into several different zones, but at the risk of being complicated, I'm going to go quick here. Typically, lands are played close to the player, and they stay there. Everything else is played above it. When an object leaves the battlefield for any reason, including a sorcery being cast, it will go into the graveyard, almost exclusively. Sometimes cards will go into exile or they're removed in the game. They're usually handled as side zones. Exactly where they are doesn't matter perfectly, especially not for getting started, although you'll find a generally agreed upon zonage is lands close, everything else in front, graveyard, exile to the side. Let's talk about the integrity of the game. Priority is a very core concept to the game, and it is very convoluted, but I'm going to boil it down. Anytime a game action occurs, or when we move between steps and phases, all 4 or more, depending on how many players, must agree that we are moving on to the next set of actions or part of our turn. Every single time that happens. Typically in a game of Magic, we hand wave this. We just say, I'm moving to combat. The players don't say, okay. They just speak up when there is something they'd like to do. Keep that in mind if you're playing fast. Sometimes your friends will say, hey, I meant to do something in your main phase, but you're going quick, I didn't interrupt. But technically we agree that we move on every single time, and that's important because any player can respond with an instant, a flash, or an ability that doesn't specify that it needs a timing restriction. When you cast a spell or use an ability, that ability will manifest in an imaginary zone called the stack. And the stack can range from a single spell being cast, a creature leaving your hand, you've paid the mana, and now it exists in this imaginary zone, or a series of spells where your opponents have decided to respond. I cast a grizzly bear. My opponent, in response, casts a counterspell. I, in response, counter with my own counterspell. Stacks can go basically to an infinite height. What's important to know about the stack, and this is why it is called such, they resolve from the newest card to the oldest card, and that way you can deal with issues involving multiple targets and stuff like that. As a new player, I beg of you, the easiest way to resolve a stack is to literally place cards and abilities on the table. The first card, the second card, the third card on top of each other, and then just simply pick them up and resolve them in order. That is why it is called the stack, and that will help you understand what's happening. If a spell or ability no longer has a target on the stack because other things have happened, like it has died, or it has been countered, that ability fizzles. It does not work. Resolve the stack fully every time. Make sure that you can wait for responses to each individual action, but the stack must go away before you continue on with the game. Triggers are another important part of the game. They do go on the stack, and what they are is cards that lay out specific conditions. We'll say at the beginning of X or whenever X, Y, or Z. Those cards have a condition that when fulfilled, they'll create a trigger, they will pop up on the stack, and we must resolve them. There are several types like entering the battlefield or whenever a creature attacks. They all create a pause in the game where we evaluate the state, do what it says, and then move on. Abilities which are activatable at any time will show a colon, and it will show you what you need to do before, and it will give you the result after. The last sort of important core concept of cards and card types is creatures and how to handle combat. We'll get to that in a second, but I'd like to explain their stats. Creatures have numbers on the bottom right of them. The first number is their power, how much damage they do. The second number is their toughness, how much damage they can take. A brief explanation of combat. There are several smaller phases within combat, but here's how you handle it. You move to combat. The player whose turn it is declares all of the attacks at once. Creatures inherently have the tap to attack ability. Creatures can tap to attack. They can attack any number of players, but they must assign all of their attacks at once. In order, going clockwise, that player who's next assigns blocking creatures. Unless there are restrictive circumstances like flying, reach, trample, you'll understand those keywords as you see them and read through them. That player can block a creature with a creature. A tapped creature can't block in combat, but it can still use its abilities unless they require a tap. What's important to know is once a creature becomes blocked, move on to the next player, complete the blocking phase. After that, we'll go to assigning damage. Each creature will do its power to the other creature in terms of damage. We will subtract that out of their toughness. If they hit 0, the creature will die, or more than that, they will die. They'll go to the graveyard at that point. If they don't, they will heal that damage at the end of turn, but that still allows some time for you to interact with perhaps a lightning bolt. Something that does instant speed damage could take advantage of a creature who's been weakened in combat. After all the damage is done, which occurs at the same time, then we move to the end of combat and we leave the phase. Please note that creatures with lifelink, for example, which heal, do damage at the same time that a player takes damage. All damage occurs at the exact same moment. The format that you'll see on this channel, and one of the most popular, is called Commander. A legendary creature, or any other card that says it can be your commander, is set aside from the deck, and a deck is built around them. Your commander exists in a separate zone called the Command Zone. They are not on the battlefield, and they're not in your hand. However, you can cast them anytime you normally could. If they have flash, it means whenever, but if they don't, during your main phase. When your commander dies or leaves the battlefield for any reason, you have the choice to put them in the zone they're going to go to, like your hand, the graveyard, or exile, or to put them back in the command zone. When you put them back in the command zone, you can cast them again, although every time you do this, it adds 2 additional generic mana to the casting cost of your commander. That makes commanders cost a lot by the end of the game, but you'll always have access to them. It's important to note that this rule only applies when they leave or move zones, and it doesn't apply when they transform or they move around the battlefield. If your opponent takes control of your commander, unfortunately, that sucks. And you should attack them with everything you have, but there is no rule for replacing your commander back to the command zone in this way, shape, or form. I'm not going to get into deck building mechanics here because it's a whole convoluted topic on its own set, but what you need to know is this. It is a 4-player free-for-all. Life totals start at 40, and you start with a hand of 7. Each player goes around the table in order. Typically it's a 1v1, b1v1, but more players can be added, less players can be added, teams can be made. It will proportionally adjust the game length on top of that. A player is removed when their life total hits 0. They try to draw from an empty library, or they take 21 commander combat damage specifically. It must be in combat. Those effects will eliminate a player from the game. Last man standing wins. There are other cards in Magic that say you win or lose the game. Please pay attention to those and follow their instructions. They are other alternate win conditions. However, they're not the common ones. The game is a simple game. The rules are very structured and rigorous, but what's tough is the cards. New sets add new cards, new mechanics, and I'd like to highlight planeswalkers, like this one. They have once per turn used abilities, and they have their own loyalty, for lack of a better term, resource that they have to pay out. You can add them by using resources of their own abilities and remove them. And while you won't see a planeswalker in every game, you will see new card types and abilities that you don't understand. I recommend 2 places. The first is Wizards' official card repository. It's called Gatherer. At the bottom of the page, you will see common rulings about cards and card types. This is a great place to check. If you don't see a way to interact with this card or a basic explanation, I will link the official Wizards of the Coast rules in the description, although I hope that you won't need that right away. Most keywords and mechanics will have reminder text in parentheses after to show you what it does. Lastly, there is a ban list for Commander, the format that we play on this channel. And while I don't think you'll need to pay attention to it, especially not to get to play right away, if you find that your first games are in a local game store, you may encounter it and you may have some older cards you think are cool that will be on this list. I would encourage you not to worry about it right away, especially if you're buying a pre-con deck, a pre-constructed deck, and getting out the door. But it is something to be aware of and you should consider. I feel like that's it, right? That was a weird one.